Welcome to the Autism Wellbeing Plan, the podcast where you learn how to use advanced functional lab testing, healthy diet, and smart supplementation to improve your child's health, well-being, and quality of life, and by extension, your own quality of life. Please remember that this podcast is for educational purposes only, and always consult your healthcare practitioner before implementing anything discussed here. Now, here's your host and author of the book Autism Wellbeing Plan: How to Get Your Child Healthy, Christian Yordanov.
In this episode, I thought I would tie together some of the things we've been discussing in the previous episode. So what you may find is there's a lot of information out there and in my book and in various other resources, and there's a lot of different moving parts to investigating and addressing your child's health challenges. So it can get confusing, it can get a little bit overwhelming. So I thought I would kind of step back a little bit and just take a more overview kind of look at what do you actually do when and if your child is diagnosed with autism or you suspect that they may be on the spectrum, right? So what I will discuss here is a section, probably the last section of my book, from the last chapter. There is a 3 example protocol of the first 3 to 6 months, right? And so we will take a hypothetical scenario, which is actually very typical, right, for many autistic children. And we will look at, what the parents would do, how they would, what tests they would run, what kind of supplements they'll do, just to give you basically a more coherent picture of, so it's basically to give you a model that you can follow or modify to your needs, right? But this would be a very typical scenario that we're going over. So it would certainly apply to a large subset of autistic children, right? So here is the scenario we have. So, and of course, I'll just remind you, if you haven't got the book yet, let me know. I'm still giving away copies to all interested listeners. It's on Amazon. If you enjoy or find the information on the podcast valuable or interesting, the book is going to exceed your expectations. It's just jam-packed full of useful information for you to genuinely investigate and address the potential hidden health challenges that your child may have, right? So definitely, I believe probably the best resource out there for parents, and highly recommend that you at least get the free sample on Kindle, just so you can look at the table of contents to see the many topics that I go into detail, right? So there's, as I said before, close to 500 scientific references in the back of the book. So there's a lot more you can do in terms of further investigation. There's the rabbit hole goes deep with this kind of stuff, as you probably know. It can get overwhelming. This is why I have, categorized and put it in a coherent manner. And, there's a lot of extraneous information in there's a lot of studies that won't have actual relevance when it comes to doing something about your child's health challenges and improving their health. So all that research, even though I've a lot of it I've had to read through to discern whether it's worth putting in the book or not. It would save you months and months and months and many hours poring over this research yourself. So I thought I would, save you that time. And this is actually a crucial point to kind of underscore is it can, a lot of parents, they may spend months and months at the beginning doing this research. So what can happen is you can get yourself in a situation of analysis paralysis, where you're researching, you're learning, but you're not doing. And the most important part is the doing. You want to hit the ground running as soon as possible, so you can immediately start identifying and addressing your child's health challenges. The sooner you do that, the sooner you remove the obstacles to health, the sooner uh, growth and development can continue unimpeded, right? So what we know from the science is that these health challenges that autistic children experience, they impede optimal growth and development physically, cognitively, of the brain, of the gut, of just as a human growing up. So heavy metals and yeast infections and bacteria and nutrient deficiencies and nutrient excesses and so on, all of these impede the optimal growth that we also want for our children, right? That's why you're listening to this podcast. So with that said, here is the hypothetical but very typical scenario we are going over. So here we have a 4-year-old child with a self-limited diet, so eats very few foods, quite a picky eater. The diet is heavy in wheat and milk products, some sweets. Generally, the child avoids meat and vegetables, eats the occasional fruit, so like a banana or something like that. Uh, Often constipated, sleep is not the best, occasional nighttime awakenings, drowsiness in the morning, this kind of stuff, right? So fairly typical scenario. So what do the parents do? The first thing the parents do is they decide to run the following tests. So the organic acids test, as I've spoken many times about that, I personally recommend the one from the Great Plains Laboratory in the USA. I feel like it has the most markers and the most useful markers. And when you look at the price per marker, if you divide the price of the test by the amount of markers you get, which is about 76 at the moment, they keep adding more, but it works out at like $3-4 per marker, which is really good value, just to get your cholesterol, total cholesterol. It could cost you like 5, 6, 7, 8 dollars or euros. So this is really good value. And you just get so much data on the various different things. So you get bacterial and yeast markers, super important. Clostridia bacteria, candida, very common in autistic children. You get several vitamin markers, so B12, B6. You also get antioxidant markers, so glutathione. You can see if that's low. There's other markers for oxalates. So oxalates are a common issue in autistic children. And there's neurotransmitters. There is mitochondrial marker. So just a ton of really, really useful data, right? So we run this test. Then they also do in our hypothetical scenario here, they also do the hair mineral analysis. I did an episode on that a few episodes ago. So this one, the intent there is to get the heavy metals, see what heavy metals the child has been excreting over the past 2-3 months, look at the copper zinc balance and just the levels of the essential nutrient minerals, things like calcium, magnesium, zinc, chromium, selenium, for example. Now, in this instance, because the child's diet is very limited, it doesn't make too much sense to run a food sensitivities panel, right? What the family is better off doing in this case is either going for the gluten-free, casein-free diet, which pretty much should be trialed on most autistic children, especially if they eat a lot of gluten and casein or dairy products, and especially if they have gut dysfunction. And the where a food sensitivities panel can become useful is later, after you have introduced new foods and increased the variety of your child's diet. Then after several months, you might want to run a food sensitivities panel then in order to see if any of the newly introduced foods are reactive in your child's body. So in this instance, we hold off on the food sensitivities test for a while, again, because there's just so few foods in the diet. So it is likely that the child is reacting to the wheat and or the dairy products. So this would be alleviated by going gluten-free, dairy-free. So we don't really necessarily want to spend a couple $100 on a test to tell us that. All right, so let us move forward about 3 to 4 weeks later. So we have now at this point received the organic acids results. Oh, I should mention also that with the organic acids test and the hair mineral analysis, the parents also run some basic blood work. So things like iron, the complete metabolic panel, just your standard markers, and several kind of more important ones such as zinc, copper, thyroid, and so on, right? I discuss in chapter 6 of my book what are the most important blood markers to run at the start and periodically are. So fast forward 3 to 4 weeks later, we have the organic acids test and the hair mineral analysis results. And in the meantime, the parents have ordered the core 5 supplements that I discuss in chapter 10 of my book, right? So the core 5 supplements are probiotics, digestive enzymes, cod liver oil, multivitamin daily, and calcium and magnesium. And that is the order in which the parents start them one by one. So they start with because the child is constipated, they start with the probiotics. Next up, digestive enzymes to help with processing the food better in the stomach. Then the cod liver oil, there is some evidence that omega-3 fatty acids can help with gut healing or gut repair, as it were. Then the multivitamin, just to add more nutrition to the limited diet. And finally, the calcium and magnesium, right? Because if and when they decide to do the gluten-free, casein-free diet, taking the dairy out, as I've talked about before, will remove a lot of the calcium from the diet. And we know that kids need a lot of calcium, more than a gram a day, more than 1,000 milligrams a day, which is a lot. And of course, calcium and magnesium are best taken together at a ratio 2:1, calcium to magnesium. Just magnesium is involved in so many body processes. Every cell in the body has magnesium. We know that not just autistic children, not just children in general, but just humans in general, diets are very low in this vital nutrient, magnesium, because we don't eat a lot of leafy greens, which are pretty much the best source of magnesium, right? Now, because in this particular hypothetical scenario, the practitioner suggests using melatonin as a short-term measure to support more restorative sleep. So this is while things like gut dysfunction. So as I mentioned, the child is having some sleep issues here and there. Its sleep is not great, which is again common. And what we know is actually that gut dysfunction could be a contributor in many people to sleep problems, right? So the melatonin is a short-term measure just to help get more restorative sleep, to support healing and repair of the body, while we investigate the underlying contributors to poor sleep, which can be heavy metals, can be gut infections and other gut dysfunction, for example, right? Also, the melatonin, it has anti-inflammatory properties. It's also good for the gut, right? So this is actually little known fact, but melatonin is good for the gut. So this can contribute to the gut repair, right? That is so badly needed, right? And as will be evidenced by the test results soon, right? Now, the parents also begin swapping in gluten-free products for the wheat-based ones that the child currently eats. So, bread, biscuits, things like that. They start getting gluten-free products. Now, they also at the same time gradually begin reducing the milk products. So as I discuss in chapter 8 of my book, when improving the diet, when transitioning to an organic diet, which should be one of your top priorities at the start of your child's health building program, is the environmental working group, ewg.org. They have a couple of lists called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So these are basically, the Dirty Dozen is a list of foods that are the most sprayed, which means these are the foods you want to immediately start buying organic, because you would be doing your child a great service by reducing the added chemicals that these foods would normally bring into the diet. Unfortunately, the Dirty Dozen list includes foods that we commonly eat, things like nectarines, tomatoes, cherries, grapes, just like I think 8 of those foods are super, super common foods that we eat, right? So it's really important that you understand what these foods are and immediately swap in organic ones for them in your child's diet, right? Then the Clean 15 are the least sprayed foods. Now here, there's a few foods here, for example, mushrooms and onions. So these are the least sprayed foods, which means you could continue buying those non-organic for the time being while you're still making the transition to an organic diet. And it's just good to have these lists. They're updated yearly by the EWG. It's good to know what the Dirty Dozen are and to stay the heck away from them if they're not organic. And the Clean 15 that you could hypothetically buy non-organic if they're not available, or if you're not ready, yet ready to make the switch to fully organic food. Now, ideally, your child immediately, as soon as they're diagnosed, or even when you suspect, or even if you just want to have your child be as healthy as possible, they should only be eating organic foods. Full stop. End of story. This is just how important this is. There is no ifs, no buts, right? And in cases, if your child has a lot of health problems, because here's the thing, a lot of these health problems I talk about in my book and on the podcast, they're often hidden. But if your child has health problems that they're visible to you already, like allergies, immune dysfunction, sleep problems, visible gut dysfunction, even more so, you need to get that diet organic immediately, right? Super important. I cannot stress strongly enough how important this is, right? So in this case, in our hypothetical scenario, the parents start buying their tomatoes, potatoes, and apples organic, because these are on the Dirty Dozen list. So tomatoes, potatoes, and apples, common foods we eat, are some of the most sprayed foods that we eat as well, if they're not organic. So super, super important to understand the EWG, the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. They just have a lot of really good resources on how to buy sunscreen, how to avoid these super toxic sunscreens, how to buy better processed foods, which are the least detrimental processed foods, which shampoos and soaps and so on are the least detrimental, right? And which are the ones to stay away from, right? Super useful resource for you out there for free. So please do yourself a favor, if you're not yet familiar with the EWG's website, go check it out at ewg.org. Now, what other steps does this hypothetical family take in this scenario? So they order an inexpensive faucet filter to improve the water quality for the whole family. So faucet filter, I think, actually, if you're watching the video, I have a box here. So this is the one I have on our tap. I got it on Amazon. You just screw it on the tap and on the faucet. I think it was like $40, maybe even less. I can't remember. The filters were also super cheap, and a filter lasts like 3 months, right? So you put you put that on the faucet to immediately reduce. Let me see what it says on the package here. So removes 99% of lead, removes 96% of mercury, and 92% of certain pesticides, reduces chlorine, improves taste and odor of the water. And then there's a bunch of other things like certain microbial cysts, industrial pollutants, carbon tetrachloride that can cause liver problems, increased cancer risk, other chlorination byproducts, just 2,4-D, which is like a really toxic herbicide, certain sediments, right, certain pharmaceuticals. So just really cheap and easy way to just improve, to reduce the toxins coming in from the water supply. Now, would I only use that? Probably not. What we do is we also have a Brita jug, so we double filter the water, right? And ideally, you would want like a to spend 1,000-2,000 euros or dollars, whatever, on a whole house filtration system or something a little bit better. But this is like a, kind of like the next best thing. It's close. It's super inexpensive, and it's things like this that can really make a difference in our health long term, right? For the whole family as well. So that's what I would recommend all families to do. Doesn't matter if anyone there has any health problems or not. They could be perfectly healthy, but if they're not filtering their tap water, that's just going to be detrimental long term, right? Now, the next thing this family does in our hypothetical scenario, and something you could do, is immediately replace soaps for safer alternatives from the health store. So these antimicrobial soaps and all these um, uh, fabric softeners and washing powders, uh, it's okay to finish the current package you're using, but the next one that you buy, don't go to the department store, the supermarket, and buy that toxic stuff again. Go to like a health store, do a little bit of research, and get like an organic based product more that uses more natural, especially so this is super important for your washing powder, your fabric softener, the soaps, any other kind of soap or liquid that you use to bathe your child, and just the cleaning products for the floor, the toilet, the bath, the bathroom, around the kitchen, dishwasher tablets as well, right? So these are the most important things that if you can afford it, just throw them out and buy new ones. I would totally recommend that. And if you can't afford it, people are on a budget. This is a fact of life. Most of us are on a budget. In that case, just finish your existing ones and just switch to better ones. They're slightly more expensive. That's true, but it's an investment. It's not an expense. It's an investment in your whole family's health, right? And then the other thing we do in this hypothetical scenario, so the family remember the child has sleep issues. So what the family start doing is start dimming the lights as sleep time approaches. So reducing the light at least an hour, but hopefully 2 to 3 hours prior to bedtime is a very important thing to do. Also, turning off all screens at least 1 hour, ideally 2 or more before bed, is super important in order to reduce that source of blue light that suppresses melatonin production that can cause us sleep problems, right? So these are the kind of the extra actions the family takes, right? So now we look at the test results. So the blood test results arrive within the first week of testing, and we know that now. Looking at the findings, the most important findings are zinc is trending towards the bottom of the reference range. Copper is close to the top of the range. This would be very, very common. You would very likely see that in many autistic children. Vitamin D is on the low side, not deficient, but definitely low. And then a marker called homocysteine is slightly elevated. This is like an inflammatory marker. And then, as I mentioned, 3-4 weeks after taking the samples, sending them off to the labs, we get the organic acids test and the hair mineral analysis results right? So it's been a month. The family has already made got those core 5 supplements, made some dietary changes, made some tweaks around the house to reduce toxic exposures, worked on the sleep hygiene a little bit, right? So we've made a lot of progress already, despite the fact that we haven't even got the organic acids test results. Now, the organic acids test shows candida overgrowth, yeast, Clostridium difficile presence, elevated oxalates, and a low normal B6 level. So it's very, very, very unlikely if you run the organic acids test, you will not find some type of healing opportunity or something to improve in your child's metabolism and body. So in this case, that's what the organic acids shows us. You're very likely to see something, just to kind of reiterate how the value of this test, right? Then the hair mineral analysis indicates elevated copper, low zinc, low magnesium, low selenium, and moderate aluminum and mercury levels. Fairly common finding again. So high copper, depressed zinc, low magnesium, selenium, very, very commonly low in autistic children. So what we do now that we have these lab tests, there's some additions to the protocol that the family are currently using. So the sequence of supplements become the following, right? So this is about, like I said, let's say a month into it. At this point, they add zinc. Then, and this is like one by one at a time kind of thing. Then after the zinc, they add, so the zinc will help to correct the zinc, the low zinc and the high copper. This is, it's also good for the immune function, for brain development, many, many, many things, right? So zinc is next. Then vitamin B6, it can also help with correcting the zinc copper imbalance. Methylfolate and B12, so they get this in a liquid form, so B6 methylfolate and B12 complex. Liquid form, very nice tasting, easy to kind of give to the child. Then they add trimethylglycine powder, and then a little note here this is if you were reading the book, even though the vitamin D was kind of low on the blood tests, the practitioner doesn't recommend adding extra vitamin D for now, because the multivitamin would have some, and so does the cod liver oil, right? So the blood test will be run every 3 to 6 months, and then we can reevaluate on the next blood test should we add more vitamin D. In some cases, it's definitely a good idea. Now, the other protocol additions to the supplement protocol would be biocidin, which is I've talked about it before. It's basically a liquid, nice tasting herbal mixture that can support pathogen eradication, so yeast, bacteria, parasites. It also has these herbs in there, things like garlic, oregano oil, echinacea, things like that. There's just a lot of goodness in those herbs, not just in terms of getting rid of bad bugs, but they have anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties. So just the family does 1 drop per 5 kilograms of body weight. So in this case, this child, about 4 years old, would be, say, about 17 to 20 kilograms. So about, they start with 1 drop and then gradually increase it to about 4, maybe 5 drops over the space of a couple of weeks. They also add Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a probiotic yeast, which can help with yeast overgrowth, Clostridia bacteria. So it's just really good to have in a protocol. They also add extra selenium to bring up those selenium levels. Also, selenium is good for things like toxic metals. So just really good to have this nutrient in the protocol. Now, because the organic acids test shows elevation in oxalates, which is common when candida are high on the organic acids test, the parents begin reducing foods that are high in oxalates slowly and replace them with lower oxalate substitutes. These would include things like, so the wheat, probably in this case, because the child doesn't eat many foods, so the dietary oxalate is most likely coming from wheat-based products. In other cases, it could be things like carrots, spinach, sweet potatoes, chocolate. So there's basically, if your child has high oxalates, you just get the list of foods that are highest in oxalates, see which of them are in your child's diet, and begin to gradually reduce them by 5 to 10% per week. Now, in this just continuing our hypothetical scenario here, other supplements that the practitioner recommends for general support, so carnitine to support mitochondrial function, taurine in the evening has many beneficial properties. I won't go into it now. And then a small amount of glycine and N-acetylcysteine to support glutathione production, to support the antioxidant and detoxification pathways in the body. Won't really go into that much now, but just to give you again, so the intention of this episode is just to give you what is the kind of a standard protocol, what is the progression, what is the sequence, how does that look, just to so you can again build a picture of this, so you could model this for your own kind of purposes. And then just to wrap up, the retest, when to retest. So about 3-4 months later, the parents have the option to retest with the organic acids test, or they also have the option to run a stool pathogen screening. There's benefits to both. In this case, they don't have insurance cover, which means they have to pay out of pocket for the organic acids test. So they decide to wait another couple of months for the organic acids test, just to kind of preserve some cash. In the meantime, they have managed to get a free stool pathogen screening from their local clinic. So they run that in order to kind of look at, so the organic acids test looks at Clostridia bacteria and yeast, Candida, stuff like that. So a more specialized stool test, you can look at things like parasites, specific species of bacteria and strains of bacteria. So there's definitely value, especially if it's like a good quality test, right? Then after about 3-4 months, the family, they also run another hair test just to kind of monitor the copper levels, see how the toxic metals are being excreted. And generally what they would normally notice, so in this hypothetical scenario, which is a common scenario, is the copper is elevated even more because of the added zinc and B6, so there's more copper excretion in the body. And then because of the addition of all these nutrients and the child's health improving in many ways, there's an increase of mercury and aluminum on the hair test, meaning that the child is excreting more of these compounds, because of the zinc, because of the taurine, because of the glycine, the N-acetylcysteine, and so on, right? This was basically a look at. I know it was I was going a bit fast, but there's always so many kind of moving parts and things to cover on a protocol. I do cover this in the book in more detail. Definitely check it out if you if you're interested in kind of getting into the more nitty-gritty details. There's plenty of information there for you. But so this is kind of like what the first 3-4 months would look like for a family that are actively, they understand the benefit of why we are doing all of this. They're working with a practitioner that can guide them, and they really want to see their child's health improve as quickly as possible, right? What I would say is this is the cadence or the velocity or the speed, the optimal speed at which you could go. Unfortunately, many families, they just there's so much information to absorb and so much kind of different competing things to research and so on, that they don't follow this protocol this quickly. This would be kind of like an ideal scenario. So if you are aware of this information, of this podcast, of my book, if you are kind of on the fence, should you run this test, should you run that test, I would recommend kind of just read this. It's in chapter 12, kind of near the end of the book. Read this example protocol and sequence, and if you can model this would be the most optimal thing to do for your child, right? Because many doctors and researchers have stated this, right? If you start before the age of 4, you can get the most progress, right? And every month the opportunities are slowly slipping away, right? So what you want to do is move as quickly as possible, get these tests as quickly as possible, get the supplements, change the diet, improve the diet, reduce the toxic exposures as quickly as possible, because kids develop super fast, right? 3 months of development when you're 3 or 4 years old is a huge amount of development. And if you can remove as many impediments to that development as you can at any age, you're just going to accelerate your child's development physically, cognitively, whatever way you can think of, right? So this is why I have to stress the importance of moving fast. Here, this is really, this game is all about moving fast. There is no time for second guessing. You can always, like, you can order a test, you can run a test, you can always do nothing. But having the data is super important, right? So get the data as quickly as possible. The test might come back everything negative and everything is great. That's great. That just means there's more kind of things to investigate. But having the data is always going to be better than not having the data, right? And having a practitioner to kind of guide you is super important. So if you're not working with one, definitely, you need to be. This is kind of the advice I would give you. So I think I could go on forever, but I'm going to wrap this one up here. Hopefully, again, this gave you a more clear picture of how a good optimal, I don't want to say optimal protocol, because in this particular instance we would have added more tests, more supplements. But again, we have to work with real world humans and scenarios and budgets and difficulties in terms of kind of getting the time to do this research and so on and so forth. So this is kind of like something that I would aim for as a really good way to go about identifying and addressing an autistic child's health issues that are most likely to be present, right? And what to do with the diet, what to do with the supplements, and how to clean up the home and improve the sleep hygiene, right? So we'll leave it there. I hope that you got something out of this episode, and I thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening. Please help us to spread this vital information by rating the podcast on iTunes and sharing it with others who may find the information useful. For further content and resources, go to christianjordanoff.com. Don't forget to pick up your copy of the book Autism Wellbeing Plan today, available on Amazon.